Hi, everybody. Today's Friday, December 27th, 2024. Our friend Scott Ritter is back with us. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me. And belated Merry Christmas.
Yeah, very good. Scott, let's get started with what Putin said about the way that he sees the conflict in Ukraine, talking about postponing Ukraine's accession to NATO. And here is what he said.
I don't know what they are saying right now in the uh, new upcoming team of the next American president, but in 2021, President Biden back then proposed exactly that. He said that they would postpone the ascension of Ukraine to NATO for the next 10 years because it was not ready. And I responded, yes, it wasn't ready. But what you will do is you will prepare it and then make it part of NATO. So it's actually uh, not that long of a period. For us, it doesn't matter whether it's 1 year or 10 years. In historical terms, that's not so much. And I don't know if that is the true opinion of the Trump's team. But what's the difference between the proposals that you shared right now and the proposals of Biden's old administration? I don't know how the situation is going to develop going further and what the orders will be given by President Trump to his administration, but we will see.
How do you see right now, Scott? Do you think that the position of Donald Trump and his administration would be the same as we saw with Joe Biden and his administration, or they're going to do some important changes in their attitude in Ukraine?
Well, you have to keep in mind that the advisors to Donald Trump come from the same stock as the advisors that advised Joe Biden and advised Barack Obama before him, advised Donald Trump during his first administration. These are Russophobic minded people whose singular goal is the destruction of Russia. Straight up simple. They will not accept anything that allows Russia to emerge victorious, even if that victory doesn't infringe on the United States or anything that enhances Russia's stature. This is a purely zero-sum game. Anything that's good for Russia is bad for the United States in the minds of these people. And so long as they advise Donald Trump, that'll be the policy set that they put in. Look, President Putin was being very diplomatic. Lavrov wasn't. Let's just make it as clear as possible. Russia went to war in Ukraine because of Ukraine's potential of becoming a NATO nation. Russia's winning that war. Russia's not going to allow Ukraine ever to be a member of NATO, ever. It's not on the books. It's a waste of time to even discuss it. So anybody in the Trump administration that's putting forward a plan that's postulated on some eventual Ukrainian membership is, as President Putin said accurately, if they're not ready now, that means that you're going to get them ready. And then what happens when they are ready? Russia's not going to let that happen. So I think, Donald Trump, it appears, recognizes that his plan is in trouble. And so he made a statement the other day that said that basically it's all speculation until he meets with Vladimir Putin. And it's going to be one of the shortest meetings ever. Because Putin, there's not going to be any, Trump staring him in the eyes and giving him the Joe Biden, you're evil thing, all that nonsense. It's going to be Trump saying, hey, what about, and Putin will say, no. What about, no. What about, no. And Putin just said, what part of we won the war don't you understand? And if you want to be part of the losing side, you have a chance in history right now to get yourself out of this mess. But if you want to double down on stupid, pour good money after bad, feel free, because we're winning and we're not going to lose. We're willing to put everything into this. What are you willing to put in? And Trump doesn't have an answer to that because Trump's not ready to put everything into it. So I think eventually Trump will have to make some hard decisions that will run against the grain of his Russophobic advisors. But it's either that or just continue this failed policy. Nothing is going to stop Russia from winning this war. There's not enough money. There's not enough military equipment. NATO doesn't have the ability to meaningfully intervene. So nothing's going to stop Russia from winning this war. And that's the hard truth that Donald Trump's going to have to confront. Trump knows that there's two very weak links in the American national security fabric right now. One is Ukraine. He needs to jettison this Ukrainian problem. This has cost America hundreds of billions of dollars, and it's weakened us globally. He needs to jettison that. And he also needs to put NATO on ice. NATO is an organization that's outlived its usefulness. It was a valid, viable organization during the Cold War. Since then, it's become an expansive extension of American imperial hegemony. And I think Trump recognizes that he needs to start focusing on, the things that keep America, relevant in the world today, and not have these parasitic problems attach themselves to America. NATO is a parasite, sucks the lifeblood out of the United States, and Ukraine is the same thing. So Trump, I think, will eventually make the right decision, but it'll be politically difficult for him.
I think right now, as Putin mentioned in this video, their main doubt is what would come with the new administration, because we know that Donald Trump is pretty much straightforward. He says what he wants. But the administration, Keith Kellogg and all those people that are going to make some sort of policies toward Ukraine and toward Russia, what type of leverage do they have on Donald Trump, in your opinion? Is that going to be Donald Trump at the end of the day deciding about that? Right now, it seems to me that it's not clear in the mind of Russians what would happen. That's why they don't know the leverage these people have on Donald Trump, how Donald Trump would be strong to make the decision at the end of the day.
I don't think the Russians give a damn about Donald Trump. They don't care. They really don't. The notion that Russia's holding on for a miracle. We're holding on by our fingertips. We just got to hang in there a little bit longer, guys, till Donald Trump comes in and saves the day. That's the world according to Donald Trump. Russia's like, we don't care. Donald Trump is an American president, and all American presidents are the same. We don't have any artificial expectations here. We don't, we're not holding out hope. We'll see what he has to say, but we don't care. Our policy remains the same. And that's the Russian approach right now. They just don't care. I mean, they're not holding, they're not, first of all, they're not struggling. The notion that Russia is, oh God, we got to hold on, guys. Hold on, man. Cavalry's coming. Trump ain't the cavalry. It's not for Russia. So no, this is, Americans, we're so egocentric. We believe that the world revolves around us. So somehow many Americans have bought into the notion that Trump is going to save Russia from this problem that is good. Trump believes that too. This war should never have happened. It wouldn't have happened had I been president. Wrong answer, Donald Trump. Russia doesn't care about you because you don't know anything about Russia. I mean, the moment the United States actually can sit down at the table and speak intelligently, the moment they can bring somebody like a Jack Matlock, former ambassador to the Soviet Union, to the table instead of bringing idiots like Michael McFaul. Michael McFaul, the Russians just tuned out the Obama administration, said, we're done. You're static noise. We don't listen. Jack Matlock had to listen. Intelligent conversation, knowledgeable. We have to bring somebody of that caliber to the table for the Russians to listen to. Donald Trump's not it. And the Russians will listen to him, but Donald Trump has to understand, and somebody really needs to sit down and whisper him that the best way to solve this thing is to shut up and just get the hell out of there with minimal fuss. If you try to posture, sometimes, when you step into a pile of dog poop and you walk into somebody's home, the best thing to do is turn around and walk out. But Donald Trump's going to sit there, look down and go, oh, I stepped in dog poop. It stinks. I'm going to scrape my shoe here and I'm going to, no, Donald, you're just spreading it around. You can't repair what has been done. NATO and the United States has lost in Ukraine. You're not going to walk out of this with your head held high. You have dog poop on your shoe. Leave the house. That's the best solution for Donald Trump right now. And the sooner he recognizes that, the less they talk about it. You know, make Ukraine a non-issue. Just unplug and leave. Watch how quickly the world forgets about Ukraine, because Ukraine is as irrelevant as the day is long. Nobody cares about Ukraine. It's only relevant because Western politicians make it so. If you stop talking about it, no one cares. Literally, nobody cares about the Ukrainians. If they did, this would be a far different conflict. If we truly cared about tens of millions of people suffering, from the ravages of war, we do something. Europe's kicking the Ukrainian refugees out, sending them back to a land where there is no heat and electricity because they don't care. We allow a war to continue that has, by some counts, 1.1 million dead soldiers. We don't care. As soon as people realize that, it just becomes clear. The best way to stop stinking up the house is get the dog poop out of the house. People clean up afterwards, but you don't have to announce it. You don't have to say anything. Ukraine is dog poop on the shoe of America. Get it out of the house, scrape it off, clean your shoe, and don't talk about it ever again. That's the best way out of this problem. It's a banderist regime that is despicable. It's a bloodthirsty regime that doesn't care about its own people, and it's an aberration to humanity. And the best way, the most humane solution. Again, I know I get in trouble, but I don't care. Atticus Finch, To Kill a Mockingbird, rabid dog in the street. Shoot the dog. Ukraine is a rabid dog in society, in humanity today. Shoot the dog. Shoot it. Get it done with. Because otherwise it's going to bite things and make everybody else sick. I know people are going to say, that's cruel. You can't say that. Come up with a better solution. I mean, one that didn't cost Ukraine 1.1 million dead soldiers. Come up with a better solution, you idiots. I mean, I spit in the face of these people. Oh, you allowed a war to go on to kill 1.1 million Ukrainian soldiers. You allowed it. You made it happen. Russia didn't want this. Russia did everything to avoid this. You in the West made this happen. Shoot the dog.
Do you think that the people who are going to work with Donald Trump and Donald Trump himself, they're going to accept the interpretation of the data, the intelligence data coming from the Biden administration, or they're going to get the raw data and they're going to decide about how they're going to interpret those intelligence informations or data that coming from Ukraine? Because this is a huge change for the decisions on the part of the Donald Trump and his administration.
It doesn't matter. Whatever data they use, it doesn't matter. Your question implies that Donald Trump has a vote, that Donald Trump has a say, that Donald Trump matters. He doesn't matter in any of this. He thinks he matters, but he's already walked away from the magic phone call. Remember, I'm one phone call, I can stop this war. You can't, Donald Trump. Russia doesn't care about you. You're a buffoon. Stop being a buffoon, start becoming a serious man, and Russia may care about you. But the first thing to do to become a serious man is get good data. Okay, you have Tulsi Gabbard. Get her in as the director of national intelligence. Make that happen. Then turn to her and say, get me the good stuff. Okay, I'm not here with an agenda. I want the good stuff. Your best analyst. Don't spin it for me. You're not here to sell me a policy. I want the good stuff straight from the hip. The good stuff. But what's happened is the intelligence community's gotten so used to feeding presidents who say Russia must be bad. Imagine if somebody came in and said, boss, Russia's not a threat to us. Not at all. Russia's not going to invade Europe. The Russian military is sized appropriately for its own defensive needs. The troops that they've brought on since 2022 are solely because of NATO expansion and the conflict in Ukraine. If NATO were to be part of a rethinking of European security framework, such as the Russians proposed in their December 17, 2021 treaties, draft treaties, we could probably see the Russian military downsizing to a level that would be equivalent to what existed in 2021. which we didn't deem as a threat to Europe. That's the truth. That's the truth. Mr. President, the Russian defense industry right now, is heavily engaged in producing strategic nuclear deterrent forces. But this is a huge commitment of resources to Russia. If we were to take a realistic look at our needs for strategic deterrence, as opposed to continuing this policy of a preemptive nuclear strike, we could probably save a couple $1 trillion over the next 30 years by just downsizing and limiting the modernization to that which is essential, and work with the Russians to bring arms control back into the mix. But Mr. President, we have to approach this from the standpoint of parity. It has to be mutually acceptable. We have to understand that we need to make some fundamental changes in our nuclear doctrine, because the concept of America being nuclear dominant is over. And if we want to continue to pretend that we're nuclear dominant, then we'll be engaged in an arms race that we can't afford. We're not going to win, and probably result in a nuclear conflict where everybody dies. This kind of realistic conversation that needs to be had with Trump. And somebody has to tell Trump when he throws a temper tantrum and say, shut the up, President. Mr. President, stop throwing a temper tantrum. That ain't going to change it. You can fire me, but you hired me to tell you the truth. I'm telling you the truth. And you losing your cool because the facts don't suit your fantasy is your problem, not my problem. I'm not going to change the intelligence to, calm you down. You got to be an adult about this. But nobody has that conversation. Nobody has that conversation. Everybody, oh, yes, Mr. President, what do you want to hear? Russia's bad? Oh, we got an analyst that'll tell you how bad Russia is. What do you want to hear? That their economy is weak? We got one that'll tell you that too. We got an analyst for anything you want. What do you want, Mr. President? We'll just shape the data to please you. And as a result, we get bad policy. Because the only way you can sustain the rules-based international order logically is to lie to yourself. Lie to yourself about how relevant you are. Lie to yourself how powerful you are. Lie to yourself about how what you're doing is changing the world to suit your needs. But it's not. We create this Potemkin village of data, and as soon as it collapses, you see the awful reality. And somebody needs to be honest with this president, and the president has to be man enough to hear the truth and then adapt accordingly.
We are hearing from Keith Kellogg and the Biden administration that they want to put Ukraine in a better position for whatever comes next in terms of the conflict in Ukraine. But with the aid sending from the United States to Ukraine, and we know the situation with the Ukrainian army, what else can they do for Ukraine? I don't see any European countries being able to send their troops to Ukraine.
Nobody's sending troops. Stop talking about troops. It isn't going to happen. Troops is a major escalation that leads to a nuclear war.
Who's going to fight?
Well, no, it's not who's going to fight. Who's going to die? Again, find me a European country that knows how to die. And knowing how to die means that you know how to go to war, that you know what's going to happen, that you accept the fact that on this given day, that regiment's going to suffer 30% casualties because this objective is important enough that when you send in 10,000 men, 3,000 are going to die, and your society is ready to accept that. But those 3,000 die because you actually have a military that understands what killing and being killed is. But it's like anything. Go fight a boxer, a trained boxer who's had 20 fights under his belt. Put him in the ring against a person who's never fought before. Maybe they're perfect in the gym. I can hit the heavy bag. I can do this. I can do that. Get in the ring. And that person hasn't been hit before. Boxer's going to come in and knock the living snot out of them. Bam, dead. Bam, down. That's what happens when you get a military that's not used to modern combat. Because they're tentative. They're all going to come in. They're going to, what do we do? We fired the weapon at the range, but and the Russians are like, davai. They start killing because they're ready to die. They don't want to die, but they understand that they're going into an environment where death is the norm. And so accepting that, they know the best way to survive is to aggressively push forward and kill the enemy. This is a completely different Russian army that existed in 2022. The Russian army in 2022 Marat Karelin, a wonderful Russian journalist, covered the war in the Donbass from 2014 up until 2022. And he remembers watching the militias grow to become a self-defense force and become sort of a permanent military organization. But it always had this grassroots militia element to it, informal chain of command, and the tactics were street tactics. They weren't the tactics of a professional military force. And I remember he was talking. He said, "Yeah, when I heard that the Russians intervened, I went to my militia friends and I said, watch, here come the big boys. Watch how they do this." And he said he watched the Russians come in, and after a week he was like, they don't know what the hell they're doing. I mean, they're literally committing suicide. They're running out there without proper security. They're not protecting their flanks, and the Ukrainians are ambushing them. And then he's like, you guys have to go out there and tell them how to survive in this environment. The Russian military is a peacetime military. And like all peacetime, there's a famous book about America's first battles, and it talks about the first battles that America fights throughout wars. And it's basically a story how you take, an American peacetime military and you put it through the horrors of war, and they always lose. They always lose because they hesitate. They're not ready. They're just not. They don't have that killer instinct. But eventually, they get the killer instinct, and then they're unbeatable. Russians have the killer instinct right now, and NATO doesn't. And by the time NATO figures out, how to have the killer instinct, they'll have lost 300, 500,000 men, and they don't have another 300 to 500,000 to put in there who are trained. So NATO's not going to do a damn thing. Not a damn thing.
How Zelensky, Fitzo said in his visit to Moscow, said that Zelensky tried to bribe him.
I don't know. I mean, that's Fico's interpretation of events. I think Zelensky was probably looking at alternative economic options for Slovakia, but not even Zelensky's not stupid enough to just straight out try and bribe a national leader. But he is a desperate man right now, and so I think he was playing with alternative economic models that that could have seemed attractive. But this brings up another question about Zelensky. You do understand the Russians aren't going to negotiate with him. They don't view him as the legitimate leader. They've said that over and over and over again. He's not the legitimate leader. So, one of the things, before we even talk about anything down the road, Zelensky's got to go. I think when you have leaders, calling him out for what was perceived as a bribe, it's just an indication that Zelensky's lost touch with reality. And, he's not long for the presidency of Ukraine. That's my assessment. Now, of course, we may be having this conversation in 2 years and Zelensky still be president, which means that I was wrong. But right now, my money's on the fact that Zelensky is on his way to being former president of Ukraine sooner rather than later.
I don't know if you saw the Fareed Zakaria's program on CNN, in which he was trying to convince everybody that with the conflict in Syria, the way that Russia left Syria, and right now with Armenia, Azerbaijan, with the conflict in Ukraine, there are so much we can count on that and make new policies and be more aggressive toward Russia, because at the end of the day, if you remember those days of Soviet Union, we thought that they're so strong, but at the end of the day, they collapsed. He seems to believe that the same case makes sense for Russia today. Is there any sort of similarity, in your opinion, between the Soviet Union in those days and Russia right now?
None. And Fareed Zakaria is a very weak analyst, always has been, but he's weaker by the fact that he just simply doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not a Russian expert. He hasn't been to Russia. And he's not much of a historian either. the Soviet Union in the 1980s, at the time of Gorbachev, was a nation that was, had sunk into stagnation during the time of Brezhnev in the 70s, and had not quite figured out how to make a transition out of a system where the old guard had held on too long. Brezhnev, then Andropov, then Chernenko, and then all around them, because even when Gorbachev came in, you still had, a presidium that was stacked to the decks with the old guard, people who were holding on to a system that wasn't succeeding. It hadn't failed, but it wasn't succeeding to the level that it needed to be successful. And Gorbachev came in with some dramatic ideas. He basically declared a revolution. Nobody really focuses on this because we in the West, we get caught up with words like democracy and all this kind of stuff. But, in 1988, he held the 19th All-Party Conference, Union Conference, very rare event in the Soviet communist system. And it's a necessary step to make changes. And he basically carried out a revolution on the spot over the course of a week, basically transitioning the Soviet Union from, the Communist Party controlled, where the general secretary ran the shop, to moving towards representative democracy, where you would have a people's Soviet of people elected by the people, not Communist Party officials elected by the party, ruled by a president who would be elected by these people. This was Gorbachev's vision. It was revolutionary. It doesn't get any credit for being that. And he started a process that, set him up for failure because he didn't have a plan. See, he thought that he would start something and that capitalism would just happen. But capitalism in a society that was stagnant. Remember, the Soviet system wasn't a vibrant, dynamic system. It was a static, stultifying, decaying system that still worked. It's a lot like 50-year-old plumbing in a 50-year-old house. You can put in new siding, you can put in all this stuff, but at the end of the day, you got leaky pipes. And the leaky pipes are getting in the foundation, and you got to change the pipes. But he didn't. He thought he could put a new roof on it, put a new siding on it, and put paint on the walls, and he's got a viable home. No. You got a lot of problems with this house. And the Soviet Union had a lot of problems. The biggest problem he has is a guy named Boris Yeltsin, because in transitioning to this democracy model, what he didn't foresee is Yeltsin basically shutting down the Communist Party of Russia, which is the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Even though they called it the Soviet Union, lorded over everything, but it was really held up by the taxes and the economy of Russia propped that Communist Party of the Soviet Union up. And when Yeltsin said, "Now we're pulling the plug on that," that was the end of income, that was the end of viability, and basically that was the end of the Soviet Union. That system doesn't exist in Russia today. See, Fareed Zakaria's model is just 180 degrees off. Vladimir Putin actually came from the collapse of this system that we talked about. The pipes all burst, the electricity, when wire the fire, the house burned down, and there's ruins. And Putin came in and built it back up, and he built it the right way, focused on getting solid foundations in there, focused on getting good frame put in, quality electrical. The pipes are good; they're not leaking. Good water system. Built it up until now you have this solid home. Now, what Fareed Zakaria wants you to do is take a look at the home that existed in 1990 from the outside, new walls, new roof, and go, see that home? That collapsed. Now look at the home that Putin's in. New roof, new walls, new paint job. That's going to collapse too. It ain't collapsing. Fareed, go to Russia. Go to Russia. See the Russians. One of the things that I saw in the end of the Soviet times was that Russians had fallen out of love with Russia. They were looking to the West for inspiration. The West will save us. And that was sort of Gorbachev's go-to thing. The West will save us. When Ronald Reagan left, Gorbachev was looking to George Herbert Walker Bush to come in with investments and all this stuff. And I remember reading Jack Matlock's wonderful book, Autopsy of an Empire, about the final days of the Soviet Union. He kept writing saying, hey, Bush, you got to act now. And Bush said, no, I'm going to do a policy review. We're going to hold off. One of the key things was the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, because they needed this treaty so that, Yeltsin or Gorbachev could get the defense industry sized properly for what was to come, because it was a huge part of their economy. You have these cities that are run on the income derived from building missiles and all this. And Yeltsin wanted to bring that under control. And but to do that, you need this treaty. And Bush wouldn't sign the treaty until the very end. Signed it on July 31st, I believe, of 1991. 17 days later, there's a coup. You know why there was a coup? There was a lot of reasons why there was a coup, but the straw that broke the camel's back was that the defense industry had this missile called the Courier. It was a small ICBM. And because the INF treaty came in, stripped away the SS-20, SS-12, a bunch of other systems, there was no growth. The defense industry was stagnant. And Gorbachev switched over to a system called sort of a pay-as-you-go system called Kozur-Shah, self-financing. But that's not the way defense industry. So they ran out of money. They have no money. I mean, I'm talking about, when you talk about a factory town, you're talking about the schools are paid for by the factory, all the jobs, everything. There's no money. Schools don't have money. Stores are empty. Roads aren't getting repaired. The whole system is just falling down. So one of the things that they had going for them was this small ICBM project, the Courier. And it was getting ready to go into testing. They had produced, like 15 of these things, and they're starting to test launch them, and they want to get into serial production, because now you start cranking out, missiles, money comes in, they can start paying people. And this was very important for the defense industry, very important for them and for the military as a whole. Gorbachev tried to shut down the Courier system in the spring of 1991. And basically the defense ministry said, screw him, keep it going. And they got to the point where they needed him to sign off on it. Right before Gorbachev went on vacation in Crimea, he signed an order saying, shut down the Courier system. Then he went off to Crimea. That's when they met in the sauna and went, this is the death knell of all of us. If the Courier system isn't funded, the defense industry starts collapsing, we lose relevance, it's done, we have to act now. So they all got drunk and agreed on running a coup d'etat. But the coup d'etat came from missiles, arms control. And that's why the START treaty was so important, but people don't talk about that. Bush waited too long. By the time they started to make action, it was too late. Gorbachev was out. Then you have Yeltsin. Yeltsin was a drunken disaster for 10 years. Interesting, National Security Archives just released a report on what's called the second long telegram. The first long telegram was written by George Kennan back in 1946 about it led to containment policy and the beginning of the Cold War. The 1994, written by a guy named Merriman, I believe his name is, it basically said, we're doing the wrong thing here in Russia. We're focused on political solutions, but we're ignoring the economic and the social, the things that make Russia work. We're sacrificing the Russian people so that we get a politically appeasing solution here that's temporary. It's not going to last. We're destroying Russia. That's what he straight up said. We're destroying Russia. And he's right. I mean, we can get into the particulars. The Yeltsin coup of October 1993. Most Americans aren't even aware of that. You do know that Boris Yeltsin put tanks in the street and fired tanks into the Russian parliament, declared war on Russian democracy, stormed the parliament, killed the parliamentarians, dissolved the parliament. And then what did we do? to promote democracy. We didn't say a damn thing. We allowed him to cook an election in December that was supposed to, put in the people he wanted. But he's so bad that he lost that election. Now he had a really bad parliament. And now what we're doing is trying to play catch up to get Boris Yeltsin. That's right. We bought him. We put him in 1996. We installed Boris Yeltsin. He shouldn't have been the president. He had no call. But we were doing that. And this guy was calling out saying, this has failed. We're destroying Russia. We're in the process of literally allowing Russia to be destroyed so that we can have a politically satisfying solution. It was suppressed. For decades, nobody was not allowed to talk about this cable because it exposed the god-awful truth about America's policy towards Russia. Well, it's been released now by the National Security Archives. That's what we did to Russia in the 1990s. Putin came in and spent the last quarter of a century fixing this. Is Russia perfect? Hell no. Does Russia have a lot of problems? Hell yes. Is Russia perfect? No. But it's a heck of a lot better than the Soviet Union of the 1990s, late 1980s, early 1990s. Russia is a solid place. Travel to Russia. The Russian people love Russia. They love being Russia. They're proud of being Russia. These aren't people that are looking for, salvation from foreign shores. These are people looking around them saying, yeah, Ruski, I'm a Russian. I'm proud of being a Russian. We're doing okay. And we're not going to yield an inch. Fareed Zakaria has no clue what he's talking about, none whatsoever. But, the beauty of it is, and this is a point I just tried to make over and over again, the Russian people, there was a time when in the West, we could have people talk about Russia and the Russian people listening going, oh my God, they don't like us in the West. We have to change. We're not proud of who we are. We're ashamed of being Russia. We have to be what the West wants us to be. Today, the Russian be free who? We don't care. They don't care. They don't care what you and I are talking about. They don't care any of this because they're Russians. They care about Russia. They love Russia. They're proud of Russia. And all of those Westerners out here sniping away and thinking we know best and we can do this, that, and the other thing, they're not even tuned in. So Fareed is just dead wrong, 100% wrong.
It seems that they love Boris Yeltsin, as you mentioned, and we can understand the hatred toward Putin right now. But do you see any sort of mindset on the part of the West that they can get someone like Yeltsin in the future? That's why they're trying to continue this.
But again, you missed the point. I'm sure we think we can get somebody like Yeltsin. I'm sure we have people out there, what do you think Navalny was? An artificial construct of the West who had no viability whatsoever in Russia. None. I'm sure we think there's somebody out there we could. The Russians don't care. I have a plan right now for Mars. I'm thinking, within 6 years of Musk getting to Mars, we should have 6-lane highways because I think we need a lot of room to maneuver. 6-lane highways, and I've written up some papers about the kind of highway construction I want, and I have some ideas about the government and all that. Do you think Elon Musk is losing any sleep at night because Scott Ritter thinks he knows best about what life is going to be on Mars through what Elon Musk, or is Elon Musk solely focused on what he's doing? He doesn't care about Scott Ritter. The Russians don't care about any of this nonsense because it just doesn't matter. As Putin said, Russia didn't reject the West. The West rejected Russia, and Russia has adapted and is moving on. They're not losing any sleep over this. They don't need us. They don't want us. They don't cherish us. They're not waiting for us. They have moved on. Would they like a situation where things were normal? Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? But the day where Russia believes that its existential existence is linked to the West is over. Russia is Russia. Will stand on its own 2 feet. That's it. So we can sit here and talk about, who we want to come in after Putin. It doesn't matter. It's like me trying to build roads on Mars. It just doesn't matter.
Yeah. You're approaching 3 years of this conflict in Ukraine, and during this time, the Europeans are talking about that Russia is going to march toward the eastern part of Europe, and maybe they want to reach the western part of Europe. Right now, they're witnessing that Donald Trump is talking about Greenland being part of Denmark. Then he says that we want to buy. Do they have any sort of understanding when it comes to the propaganda coming from their leaders talking about Russia, and right now Donald Trump talking about Greenland, and he wants to buy Greenland because this is a European territory?
Is it? Donald Trump doesn't think so. Do Europeans have any concept of anything? Is the question. No, Europeans are part of this failed experiment, the European Union, which was supposed to elevate a unified Europe to be a world power, collectively world power. The collective power of these nations create this singularity called the European Union that would be able to stand on equal footing with the United States and Russia and China and all these people. It's a joke. It's falling apart. I mean, Germany, government's collapsed. Scholz has an election coming up. If things stand the way they are right now, Alternative for Deutschland is going to win. And when they win, they're out of the European Union. That's the thing that their leaders have promised. And the German people seem to be okay with that. And the second you get a German exit, that's it. That's the end of the European Union. It's going to collapse like a house of cards. So who the hell cares about Europe? Really, what relevance does Europe have? NATO, you have Mark Rutte sitting there talking. First of all, Mark, take a tranquilizer so that when you talk, you're still. But he's worse than Stoltenberg. I mean, he's just twitching all over the place because he's nervous. Why is he nervous? Because NATO's falling apart. They have these plans they can't afford. Germany is the economic heart of Europe, and it's collapsing. And you want to build a 300 to 500,000 new NATO force with all new equipment and all that? Christ, I want to build a extension on my house too, but my bank account won't support it. Who's going to pay for this? We're going to increase our defense spending from 2% or 3% to 5%. No, you're not. No, you're not. One or two nations might do it for a quarter or not. Then their economy will collapse. Germany's definitely not. France isn't. Who else is there? Poland? Denmark? The Baltic states are going to save us. This is just ridiculous. Ridiculous. They don't have the economies to back this up. Their societies are collapsing as we speak. And so NATO is just basically throwing out visions of this, that, and the other thing, the things they want to do. They can't do any of them. They can't do any of them. They can't afford it. So I don't think we're going to have to be talking about what the Europeans think for too much longer. I think they're in a lot of trouble. I think they started something back in early 2022 when they tried sanctioning Russia to death, and it's backfired on them big time. And they already had a lot of problems, a lot of systemic problems. European Union has never been this thriving, wonderful family of nations. They've always been bickering, and you're starting to see that bickering now as the East recognizes the West is not going to be there for them. And they're desperately trying to win over Donald Trump, but Donald Trump's not going to salvage them. Europe can't exist. NATO can't exist without the United States. And Donald Trump does not want to be a member of NATO because he recognizes it for what it is. It's a giant sump that we just pour money into. Pour money. We get nothing out of it. Nothing out of it. And Trump is just going to cut free. And when that happens, that's the end of NATO. That's the end of the European Union. There'll still be a Europe, but it won't be this. It'll have to redefine what it is. And there'll be new power structures. I think Germany, unfortunately, isn't going to be the leader of Europe. Who's going to step up and take that role? France? I mean, Macron's in a state of crisis right now. Italy? Yay. Italy has relevance. Right now they're looking pretty good, but Italy's never been a major. not since Rome. The Roman Empire has Italy been a major European power. It's always been subordinated to something. Even under Mussolini, it was subordinated to Nazi Germany. Europe is fundamentally broken, and unfortunately, I think you're going to see Europe explode into a number of small European wars that are going to just rip it apart. That's what the European Union was supposed to stop. There was never supposed to be another ground war in Europe, but then we had Yugoslavia and all the problems that came there, and it still exists because of that. And that was Europe's fault. They fatally wounded themselves with Yugoslavia. I think history is going to show that, and they started a process of using violence to solve, historic ethnic issues that can't be solved with violence. And now it's come back to bite them. And they went to war in Ukraine. They couldn't afford that war. They've lost that war. And now I think you're just going to see more and more problems emerge. Interesting to see what happens with Ukraine. What happens to the Hungarian part in Carpathia? What happens to the Romanian part? What happens to the Hungarian Romanians? I think the Slovakians have a claim on it. The Poles have a claim on it. As the knives come out, that's the end of Europe. The second you start carving up the map, that's all she wrote.
I think right now the Europeans are thinking of what would be the solution for the situation they're having right now. Are they going to militarize Europe more than before? And we know that the situation, as you mentioned, about the economy of Europe, and their economy is not affordable for their economy to go in that direction. Let's put it that way. What would come from the United States? We know that Donald Trump, as you mentioned, is not interested in NATO and the operations and, I don't know, expansion of NATO. Maybe he would be interested in sending or maybe selling more weapons to Finland and Sweden, but at the end of the day, all the burden is on European right now, on the European countries right now. How do you see what's going on in their mind, in your opinion, and how are they going to militarize Europe? Are they going to go find some sort of political solution for their problems that they're having right now?
Well, first of all, when you say they, who are you talking about? You're talking about the political elite. Because Europe ain't going to be militarized. I don't know what part. Good luck if you're, the government of Great Britain, for instance, even though they're not part of the European Union, talking about the return to conscription. That isn't going to happen. That isn't going to happen. You're talking about failed politicians who represent nobody, making these decisions that are designed to salvage their failed policies. There will be no militarization of Europe. Russia doesn't pose a threat to Europe. And you can't militarize without a budget. I mean, when you have, I forget who it was, maybe it was the Secretary General saying that, we need you to dissolve your pension funds and your social funds and basically make your people suffer so that we can build a shiny little army we don't need. There will be a revolution in Europe before there's militarization of Europe. It's not going to happen. These are fake leaders. I mean, who's saying this? Name, give me names, and then then research the political viability of this name. Who's saying it that is a strong leader is going to be there for a long time? Is Meloni saying this about Italy? We're going to militarize Italy? No. She's saying Italy will be strong, but she's not talking about because she'll be gone that quick. You ever see an Italian parliament collapse? Watch Meloni say, we're going to militarize Italy. Boom, goodbye, she's done. Collapse, parliamentarian system. Vote of no confidence, she's out. There will be no militarization of Europe. This is a NATO wet dream. And as I said, NATO isn't here much longer. NATO can't survive without the United States, and Trump has no interest in saving NATO.
We had a huge rally in Turkey. Erdogan's sons managed this rally against Israel. How do you see the situation right now in Syria? Are we heading toward some sort of cooperation between Turkey and Israel, or they're heading towards some sort of confrontation and which can get worse?
Well, I mean, Syria is falling apart as we speak. What do you expect? You put a Al-Qaeda guy in charge. He brings in his own Al-Qaeda guy as the director of intelligence. They're running around, destroying churches, hunting down Alawites. There will be a civil war in Syria. It'll explode into a civil war that'll draw in outside power. So it'll become a regional conflict done by proxy, and that's that. And I think everybody would be okay with this because we never really, again, I tried to tell people this. I went down to Tampa and I spoke with, Syrian American community. And how do you tell them that nobody cares about you? Well, part of you're isolated, don't you understand? You're isolated for a reason. Nobody cares about you. Nobody's going to lose any sleep over you. Nobody even knows you. Syrian American. What does that mean? Syrian. What does that mean? And so Syria will blow up into this perpetual conflict that'll just keep on going, and it'll be used as a way to vent steam as a pressure relief valve. But again, pressure relief valve implies heat, which heat is generated through friction. That friction is conflict, which will kill people. So Syria will just consume itself for years to come. Is Israel and Turkey going to end up in a direct conflict? No, they won't. They'll fight via proxy in Syria. A million people in the streets of Turkey, fine. I mean, come on, it's a short march. Why stop on the bridge connecting European Turkey with Asian Turkey? Keep on marching. Take those million people and go ahead and cross the border into Syria. Why not? You own that border. Keep on marching. March to the Golan Heights with those million people and on to Jerusalem. It isn't going to happen. You don't know why? Because that's for political show. It's not real. Turkey needs Israel. Turkey wants to be an energy hub. With Syria exploding, you think that pipeline that everybody's talking about, connecting Qatari gas with Europe is going to be built? No, it's not. Pipelines need stability, and right now Syria is the antithesis of stability. Turkey needs Israeli gas. They need the gas coming out of those those gas fields off the coast in the Mediterranean. Turkey needs a sound economic relationship with Israel. Israel is about ready to become a regional power economically. If they can emerge from this difficulty, they're in a much stronger position today than they were even a month and a half ago. A month and a half ago, I'd be giving Israel the last rites. Today, I'm like, well, damn it, they're back on their feet. They're stronger than ever. They still have problems in Gaza and Hezbollah, but those problems now are solvable problems. A month and a half ago, I wasn't calling them solvable problems. Iran does not want a conflict. You have an Iranian president that's bending over backwards to make good with the West. And so, Israel will emerge, and you're going to see all the nations that were critical of Israel, most of them, maybe the Irish won't, but others will, change their policy on Palestine. There will be no more talk about a Palestinian state. Why? There was nothing. How do you build a Palestinian state? The only hope was that Gaza would remain in control of Hamas. Hard to do if you can't be resupplied. And so I think, you're going to see the depopulation of Gaza. The West Bank, I think you're going to see the emboldenment of Israeli settlers who will come in and start clearing out village after village. If you don't have land, you don't have a state. I mean, I've heard people, the Palestinian state will exist in our hearts. Good luck. That and, $1.75 gets you a cup of coffee somewhere. But other than that, you got nothing in your hearts. Is that really what all these people died for, so that you could say Palestine exists in my heart? Screw you. If that was your approach, screw you. They didn't need to die then. Because if it just exists in your heart, it could exist in your heart without death. They died because you wanted a physical entity called the Palestinian homeland. That's gone. That's not going to happen, not for decades. So I think Israel is going to be strong, and Turkey is going to be linking itself economically to that, because Turkey wants to be the energy hub for Europe. That's its strategic vision. And Turkey's going to get what it wants. Turkey doesn't want Jerusalem. They can talk about wanting Jerusalem, but Turkey's sort of happy with Aleppo, Idlib, Raqqa. They'll be looking at Mosul next, I think. And then, then maybe they'll be looking at, Baku, things of this nature before they start looking at Jerusalem. That's just a feel-good moment where the Turks have always come out and talked big about their support for Palestine. They don't support Palestine. Nobody supports Palestine. The Houthi do. God bless the Houthi. They're out there just saying, we'll keep firing missiles. If nobody else will, we'll keep firing missiles. And Israel bombs them, and they're saying, we'll keep firing missiles. It's tragic, more people dying, but the Houthi, at least, they don't have a reverse gear. I'll tell you that.
And do you think that Israel would be in a position to attack Iran?
Nah. Israel's got to be careful. I mean, they're looking good right now, but they still haven't solved that problem of the 1,000 to 2,000 missiles landing on their tiny little country, and the fact they don't have an air defense system. That's a reality that exists. I think Israel right now would be well advised to let Iran move in the direction that the Iranian president is trying to take it. That could lead to a negotiated end to the Iranian nuclear program. And that's what Israel wants all along. So I think that's the strategic direction that Israel will probably be leaning to, not to, finish off Iran, because Iran isn't going to be finished off. Iran's not Syria. That's another mistake that these amateur geopolitical analysts make. Syria fell, therefore Iran is about to fall. I don't know. Iran was sort of stress tested in 2023 with the major uprisings, and they emerged from that pretty strong. One of the things about Iran, though, is that it is a democracy. Maybe not Jeffersonian in nature, but there's definitely element of democracy there. And the Iranian democracy has elected a moderate president because they want moderate policies. So why, if I'm the Israelis and I'm saying, well, this moderate president seems to be moving Iran in a direction that sort of the where we want them to go. I mean, if we were to replace the Iranian leadership and put somebody in, that's the direction we'd want them to go. So why don't we just let this happen? So I think that's the direction we're happy. They're not going to attack Iran. That would be stupid, because now Iran will have 2,000 missiles, 1,000 to 2,000 missiles that will do a lot of damage to Israel.
I think right now Donald Trump has two options with the case of Iran and Russia. Both of these countries want to talk with Donald Trump, as their officials were talking about. And here comes the question. You mentioned that Israel would want some sort of talk between maybe the United States and Iran, but we know that from the history, from JCPOA, Netanyahu is not going to get along with any sort of negotiations between the United States and Iran. This is the problem in my mind, in my opinion, right now.
Why? What if the negotiations ended the Iranian nuclear program? Would Netanyahu be supportive of that? The answer is yes, he would. And I think that's understand that, Donald Trump isn't Barack Obama. Donald Trump's not looking to make a compromise that is bad for Israel and bad for the United States. Donald Trump is looking to for, as he said when he withdrew from the JCPOA, a better deal. Remember, he said that when he withdrew from the JCPOA. He withdrew from the JCPOA because of intelligence provided pressure placed on him by Benjamin Netanyahu. So after all the pressure that Netanyahu brought to bear, what did Trump say? Burn down the Iranian house? Nope. We want a better deal. That was the reality back then. That's the reality today. And Netanyahu's in, he's doesn't have as much leverage over Trump today as he had back then. So I think Netanyahu will go with whatever. If Trump can negotiate a deal that has the Iranians give up their nuclear program, and then begin to have better relations with the West, the next thing you know, Trump will say, if you want really good relations with the West, we have to start talking about bringing down your ballistic missile capability. Gosh, there's two things Israel really wants. Now, is the Iranian president able to deliver on that? We'll find out. I remember talking to or exchanging texts with Dr. Morandi, and you know him very well. And he was like, Iran will never negotiate away its nuclear program. But I kept putting, I said, well, what do you think? What's the Iranian president doing? And he said, look, we're into very difficult, challenging times, which is his way of saying he doesn't know where Iran's going. And if Morandi doesn't know, that means that there is pressure inside Iran to negotiate away its nuclear program. It doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen, but it means that there's at least somebody inside the Iranian government who's willing to sit down and talk with the United States and Europe about that possibility. And I think that's a direction that Israel will definitely encourage, because you don't have to bomb. If you don't have to bomb Iran and you can still get rid of the nuclear weapons, that would be or nuclear weapons potential. That would be a victory for Israel. Is Iran going to do it? I don't know. I don't know if this moderate president, has the staying power. But I would say that whoever is going to challenge him needs to turn to the supreme leader and say, in addition to us provoking a war with Israel and the United States, because that's what you're talking about, here's our plan for the economic betterment of Iran too. And if I were the supreme leader, I'd say, yeah, how are we doing in 5 years on that economic plan? Oh, Mr. President, we'll be digging ourselves out of the Stone Age that we've been bombed into by Israel in the West. What about the 10-year mark? Nah, Mr. President, we'll still be digging ourselves out. About 25 years. Maybe by 25 years, we'll break even to where we are now. So you want a policy that's going to blow the hell out of my country, kill many people, so that in 25 years, we're right where we're at right now. Mr. President, what do you got to say again? Yes, I'm glad you're talking to me now. I believe that we can negotiate away the nuclear program, the nuclear weapons aspects of it, and that in 5 years, we can see our economy grow by 25%. In 10 years, we could look at 150% growth. We'd be looking at economic revival for the Iranian people. And if you're the supreme leader, you go, that's the direction I head. So whoever's going to oppose the Iranian president needs to come up with a plan other than war, because the Iranian people, I don't believe, want war. They're not dying for a conflict with the West. They've sort of been told that, they had to make these sacrifices, but eventually there will be a payout. Economic times will get better. And I think right now they're, especially after what happened in 2023, at the end of the day, the Iranian people sided with the theocracy, with the regime, with the government. But that's not forever. If the government's unable to deliver on its promise of doing better, if all the government can promise is forever wars, I think maybe that government won't be around for long. And I think the supreme leader understands that in order to make the theocracy attractive, the theocracy has to deliver the goods. And so that's why I think you have a moderate president. Didn't have to be this way. If they didn't want a moderate president, the Guardian Council just could have said, nope, sorry, you didn't pass the ideological test. But they passed him, and they knew what his platform was. And they didn't suppress him. They didn't silence him. And when it came time for the runoff election against Jalili, who's hardcore conservative, I mean, the Iranian people had a choice between a guy that wanted to, confront nuclear weapons, all that, and a guy said, "No, I'd like to have talks with the West and all this kind of stuff." And the Iranian people chose the guy that wanted to have talks. I think you have to listen to that if you're the Iranian government, if you're the supreme leader. You can't ignore that. That's the will of the people. And it's not about betraying Islam. It's about delivering on the promise of a better economic future for the Iranian people. So I think that's where we're at right now. I get a lot of criticism there. Scott, the Iranians will never negotiate with Scott. You said this. Guys, when I say something, it's because that's what the data presents itself to be. I will tell you this, doing an analysis of Iran's strategic thinking with Raisi as president, completely different analytical outcomes than with this Pezeshkian. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
I apologize to the Iranian people. It's a difficult name for me to pronounce. But the Iranian president today is not Raisi. He's not Raisi, not even close to being Raisi. And so people are like, well, Scott, you've changed. I didn't change. The Iranian president changed. I didn't change. My job is to look at the data, is to run the numbers, is to project outcomes. And with this new president, different doors have opened and other doors have shut in terms of analytical outcomes. So, it's not me changing. It's Iran that's changed. They have a new president. And that president apparently has far more clout than many people thought. Some people thought he would just be a figurehead. I think that he is far more than a figurehead. Remember, the Iranian president sits on the Supreme National Security Committee, something like that. The big, he's there. It's not like he's, like they phone in. Hey, Mr. President, we just decided. He's there. He's running it. The president's a very powerful man in Iran, a very powerful man. He's not excluded from any aspect of decision making. And so the fact that he's there, articulating his vision, and the supreme leader isn't rejecting him out of hand. The supreme leader is actually saying, okay, let's take this to the next step. What are we doing? Where's True Promise 3? I can tell you right now, the IRGC and the Iranian army was ready to launch it. They're ready. They wanted to do it. It didn't happen. Why? Because you have new political leadership. The new political leadership is not looking for a fight with Israel, with the United States, or the West. It's looking actually for diplomatic outcomes. So here we are talking about the potential of diplomacy. I actually think that Iran is an area that Donald Trump could score a huge national security victory and geopolitical victory. There's three places in the world that I think Trump could, four. Trump has the potential of solving 4 huge problems. And if he solves even one of them, it's worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize, to be honest. Whether they'll give it to him, who knows? I mean, at least he would have earned it, unlike Barack Obama. But Ukraine, he literally has the potential, if he could just jettison his idiots and come in with Putin and say, okay, what do we got? And hold Putin to his words. I mean, I'd come in and sit there and go, Mr. President, you said that you're looking for peace based upon present realities. Okay, the way I see the present reality is you held a referendum. And that referendum, saw you take control of, Lugansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk. And you've incorporated it in there. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we'll negotiate something where the Ukrainian troops will withdraw out of these territories, and these territories, they're going to leave Kursk because that's yours. Okay, so now we've agreed upon the border. Right, Mr. President? We've agreed upon the border, Mr. President? Straight up. Just call them out on it. Don't leave any opening for Kharkov and Odessa. So we've agreed on the borders, right, Mr. President? Okay, now that we've agreed on the borders, now let's talk about the, what's going to happen with, politically speaking. There will be a treaty signed. Ukraine will never be a member of NATO. The treaty will write in there that because that's what you wanted, right, Mr. President? You don't want Ukraine to be a member of NATO, correct, Mr. President? Putin goes, yeah. He goes, okay. And we want demilitarization. So I'm thinking that we're going to give Ukraine 100,000 troops. That's a fair number to guard their borders. Don't you agree with me, Mr. President? Well, I was thinking 50. No, I'm thinking 100,000 troops, lightly armed. But, you know, they have to have control of their borders. And Putin will go, 100,000? Okay, 100,000. Yeah, 100,000 troops is okay. All right. Now we need security guarantees. You know, so, and then you come up with whatever security guarantees they want. And Putin was pretty liberal on them. So let's have that. Man, you could literally, in a day, you could have this thing resolved. Constitutional changes to denazify, meaning that the Banderas will be delegitimized, they become stigmatized. You can no longer celebrate them. And I don't know, what do you do about Lvov? Maybe there's a fancy little thing that you say, okay, now we're going to hold we're going to form an internet, because the United States needs to get the hell out of Ukraine. So as soon as you get the basic agreements, you go, all right, signed, good. Europe, you guys get to figure out what to do with Western Ukraine. Romania, if you got territory, that's between you Europeans. America's gone. Russia, we made peace. We're going to lift sanctions. Let's move on. And Russia, United States, or the United States exits and gets the hell out of there. That's the easiest solution in the world. And Trump could do it just by taking charge of the negotiation. And you take charge of the negotiation by knowing what the other side wants. Listen to what Putin has been saying and give Putin what he wants. But do it in a way that makes it look like you're in charge. Okay, boom. Iran, you want a better deal? Let's do a better deal. Iran can't have nuclear weapons, can't have nuclear weapons potential. If Iran wants a nuclear enrichment capability, it's going to be tightly controlled by international inspections. International inspections, they'll have, you know, advanced protocols and all this kind of stuff that last forever. There will be no sunset clause and all that. What we agree to lasts forever. In exchange for that, we normalize relations and we lift sanctions. What do you think? And Iran will go, okay, boom. Korea. Hey, Kim Jong-un, remember me? Come back. You're not going to get denuclearization of Korea. That's not going to happen anymore. What you want now is normalization. Okay, you got to accept that things are what they are. But what you can do is start off with just normalization. So you take away the threat of war, and you get that peace treaty. Get that peace treaty down there, end this war. Then you turn to the north and you say, look, I understand you got good relations with Russia. My new best friend, Vladimir Putin. Oh, by the way, we just did that Ukraine thing. You know, so we're good. So you guys do what you got to do over there. We're not gonna sanction you anymore, but we can't exactly go into full trade relations with you until you're nuclear power, man. So the moment you want to talk about that, let us know. But here's a peace treaty. We're not a threat to you anymore. We're you. Good luck with your Russian buddies. They're our buddies too. But you know, but you can't solve that problem overnight. North Korea's got to want to come to the table. They can't be forced to come to the table, and they have to understand the price they have to pay to come to the table, which will be significant denuclearization that leads to zero. But the way you do that is to create a nuclear-free zone in that area, which means now you have to start talking to the Chinese about arms control and all that stuff. It's a separate discussion. But you could stabilize and you could bring down the tension on the North Korean peninsula that quick. You turn to China and you just say, China, I'm going to make this easy. It's a one China policy, baby. Hey, Taiwan, you'll never be independent. And our policy right now is to work towards a smooth transition. You know, and so that you are recognized, so the Chinese flag's raised over your country. I'm sorry, that's the way it's going to be. Boom. He just solved 4 major points. He could do that tomorrow, and America will emerge so much stronger. Because could you imagine what the Chinese would be willing to do in terms of trade with the United States if we could solve the Taiwan problem? Could you imagine how effective the economies of Japan and South Korea will be if they aren't worried about, you know, gearing up for war? They can just worry about pure economic problems. Russia, the opportunities for investment, in Russia once we lift sanctions. I mean, in Iran, the same thing. You know, why is it that only Chinese companies can go into Iran? You know, why isn't, if we lift this thing, why can't American companies come into Iran and get involved in the energy extraction business? And suddenly Trump has delivered, he's brought peace, and he's created booming opportunities for America, because if you bring peace, meaningful peace, the goodwill follows, and you will see that the United States will be able to come in there with a refined economic approach that isn't linked on us controlling everything. It's pure greed. That's what it should be. I mean, that's what capitalism is about. Go in there, pure greed. Just say, we're not here to tell you how to pray. We're not here to tell you how to do anything. We're just here to make money. 100% make money. Let's make money. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, that's the morally best approach. I'm talking about that's what Trump has promised. And he could very easily deliver on that. And then he can end up doing the stupid things he wants to do. Because I think what Trump's trying to do is bring stability and opportunity in the rest of the world, and then focus on creating Fortress America. And that's where the stupidity of Greenland comes in, and things of that nature. You know, but these are smaller issues. He could solve any one of those 4 problems. He could solve all of those 4 problems easily within a year. 4 trips. That's all it takes. I don't know, you know, you fly to Moscow, meet with Putin in Moscow, Moscow Treaty. I don't think he's going to fly to Tehran, but maybe they can meet in, you know, a neutral country and sort that problem out. He can go to Pyongyang. He should go to Pyongyang and sort that out. And they should go to Beijing and sort out Taiwan. 4 trips. Because these aren't complicated problems. These are simple problems. We complicate them by trying to hold on to, you know, this notion of American hegemony. But it just weakens us. It weakens us. We need to re-gear so that our primary means of interfacing with the world is economic, not military. And we actually have the economic potential to do well there. We slit our own throats with these sanctions policies and this, you know, weaponizing the dollar. The best way to weaponize the dollar is to make the dollar relevant. You want to control the world? Make the dollar the irreplaceable currency. Make the dollar the most convenient currency in the world to use. And you link that to an expansive American economic engagement. Suddenly America is the major power, and we don't have to beat up anybody to do it. Trump could do this if he wanted to do it. We'll see.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, the problem is Israel and its nuclear bombs.
Because Israel. See, Israel's not a problem. How is Israel a problem?
Because they have threatened to use their bombs against.
They're not going to use their bomb. Israel's not going to use their bomb.
Because Iranians.
Israel wants to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. That's the path of survival. Israel wants to sell its gas to Turkey. That's the path of survival. The bomb is going to become irrelevant, especially if Trump can negotiate away the Iranian nuclear program. The Israeli bomb it becomes an inconvenience to the Israelis. It's an impediment. It's a problem for Israel to resolve itself. But what you don't want to do is give the bomb relevance. And you give the bomb relevance by weaponizing Iran, by not solving that problem. But Israel, at the end of the day, if we depoliticize Middle East conflict, what leverage does Israel have? If Israel is just another nation out there trying to make a buck or make a shekel, suddenly Israel's in trouble, to be honest. Because if Israel's whole reason to exist becomes their ability to compete fairly, I tell you what, the Chinese can swamp the Israeli economy like that. So, you know, the only thing that gives Israel relevance is this perpetual warfare. This ability for Israel to say, you know, we are the super Jews, we are the Zionists, we must fight and struggle, you know, of course, with America backing us up. The best way to defang Israel is to take the conflict out of the Middle East. Look, Palestine is a self-solving problem. They solved it themselves. There is no more Palestinian issue. I mean, it's tragic. I'm not saying this, but I tried to tell don't cheer the demise of Assad, because that's the end of Palestine. They cheered, they're gone. Yeah, it's in our hearts. Okay, good. I'm glad it's in your hearts for 60 years, but nobody cares. Once people start making money, you understand that nobody cares about Palestine. That's just the tragic truth. It doesn't live in the hearts of the world. It lives in the hearts of people, but it lives in the hearts of who? Hamas, Fatah, the Palestinian Authority. I mean, which Palestinians define Palestine? Which Palestinians are we talking about? The diaspora or the people in Gaza? We're talking about the Palestinians that live in South Florida. Are they more important than, and their opinions more important than the Palestinians dying in Gaza? How about the Palestinians in Jenin that have said, we're rising up to defend Palestine, but they're being put down by the Palestinians, in Ramallah, who are coming in from the Palestinian Authority, Abu Mazen. Which Palestinians are we talking about? That's one of the problems. Even the Palestinians don't know who the hell they are. Israel, I think, is a self-solving problem. Unfortunately, the way I would have liked to see it solved is have Zionism go away and Israel go away. That's not going to happen right now unless something dramatic changes. Trump and Netanyahu tragically are the perfect Zionist team. So I think Zionism has won for the time. And the only way Zionism get defeated if you get a united front. But if all the Arab world is willing to sell their soul to be part of this greater Israel project, which they all apparently are prepared to do, if Iran is willing to, allow the axis of resistance to be diminished because they're looking for a better economic future, then there's no hope for Palestine. And so then Israel just becomes another nation in the Middle East that now has to be defined by something other than war and conflict. It'll have to be defined by the economy. And as good as Israel is, its economy is never going to be an earth change. The Israeli economy will never have the impact on the global geopolitics as the Saudi Arabian oil economy. Just isn't going to happen. So, Israel sort of, now the problem gets downsized, because now we're just talking about Israel, a nation with an economy that's trying to work with other nations that have economy. It becomes an economic issue. And Israel's economy is never going to be as dominant as Israel is by using conflict to make itself relevant, which is what it's doing now.
Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.
All right. Have a good one.